Hello, everyone, and welcome to the January edition of the French Cinémathèque, a collaboration between the Federation of the Alliance Française USA and Telescope Film. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Justine Barda, and I'm the founder and CEO of TelescopeFilm.com, a website for international film and TV. We offer a database of over 500,000 international films and series with links to where to watch them in the US. We also have a dedicated page on the site for French film and TV, with information about what's new and what's popular from France, as well as curated selections. We're delighted to be collaborating with the AFUSA, the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French. Here's a short video. We'll put links to more information about both AFUSA and Telescope Film in the chat in just a moment. The French Cinémathèque usually takes place the fourth Monday of every month. We're a little early this month as the Sundance Film Festival is coming up shortly, but next month we'll be back to our regular schedule, meeting on Monday, February 24th. We'll be talking about the film The Count of Monte Cristo, which premiered last year at the Cannes Film Festival. Based on the 1844 novel by Alexandre Dumas, it is directed by Mathieu Delaporte and Alexandre de la Patellière and stars Pierre Ninet. The film is currently in theaters for those of you who prefer to see your movies on the big screen, but is going to be coming to streaming shortly. Our film for today is Emilia Pérez, and there's so much to talk about, so let's get to it. Just a couple of brief housekeeping notes first. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking and stay on speaker view. To ask a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature at the bottom of your screen. It's in the reaction section, or you could also put your question in the chat. If there are technical issues, you may want to leave the Zoom and then sign back in after a couple of minutes using the original Zoom link. And this event is being recorded for our YouTube channels. The total runtime is 1 hour. With that, I'd like to introduce our facilitator, who is also the chief film critic for Variety, Peter Debruge. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Justine. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see a sizable crowd here today. Of course, we've got some familiar faces and a lot of new people. For those of you who haven't joined us before, I think we kind of approach this as the cinema equivalent of a book club, where my job is to moderate, but I want to encourage conversation as much as possible, and we'll kind of have it be a free-flowing organic conversation from there. What I will do to sort of set us up a little bit is just give a little bit of context for the movie. We kind of assume that everybody has seen the movie coming in, so we might talk about some of the things that happen toward the end of it, or some things that might be deemed spoilers to other people. But of course, if you haven't gotten around to it yet, just know that the idea is you can take what you've heard today into your viewing. The movie was directed by Jacques Audiard, and it also premiered, like next month's movie, at the Cannes Film Festival. This film premiered in competition, where I don't think the world quite yet knew what to make of it. I mean, the movie, as you all saw, is really quite bold. It's a musical, which is a genre that we, is kind of fighting to survive or fighting to evolve right now in the world. And, we get a few musicals every year, but this one is really obviously not your conventional one. It has very modern songs. The songs disappear for stretches of the film, and there's a lot of more kind of like almost like gangster movie storytelling. It could be a Scorsese movie in certain parts, probably, you felt. But the director, Jacques Audiard, is one of France's most celebrated and kind of virtuosic directors. I mean, he really understands the language of cinema and seems to be really kind of pushing it in ways. And I think we can see that happening in all kinds of ways that we can talk about today. For those of you who don't recognize his name, he's been making movies for a good 20 years or so, but the movie that I think really put him on the map was another Cannes title, A Prophet. And that was the movie that launched Tahar Rahim, who I consider kind of like the Robert De Niro of France. He really, ODR really works well with actors who may not have a ton of experience. He also has worked with big movie stars. In Rust and Bone, he worked with Marion Cotillard and Matthias Schoenaerts, the Belgian hunk, in an English language movie, The Sisters Brothers. He made a film in English with American stars. And of course, here, while shooting the movie in France, you may not ever guess that from looking at it, he has told a story, halfway across the world and on the other side of his own lived experience, making a movie that's kind of half English, or let's say a quarter English and 3/4 Spanish, in a totally different genre from what he's done before. So that's kind of the artist behind the movie. He's working with Justine has pointed in the chat to some other films by ODR. If you're interested to see, you will find almost no two of them to be alike. And I find that often very exciting, but it means every time you go into one of his films, you're not quite sure what to expect. He won the Palme d'Or, not for this film, but a few years back for a movie called Deepan. That was the year that the Coen brothers were the co-presidents of the jury. And so you have, two directors I adore celebrating the work of ODR in that film. Now, I tend to kind of like steer rather heavily these conversations, but in this case, because this movie, I think, sparks such interesting reactions in people, I almost don't want to put my finger on the scale at all. And I just want to kind of see who among you is feeling, kind of unshy enough, bold enough to just kind of let us know how you feel. And then we'll kind of, follow the conversation according to people's reactions and feelings. I know enough about this movie that I can bring in, some context if there are questions, but mostly want to know what you thought. So with that in mind, are there any people who feel comfortable raising their hand to kind of let us know, did this movie blow you away? Did it infuriate you? Did it go one way and then turn? Pascal, go ahead. I see your hand up.
It's very funny. I saw the movie a few months back, and I didn't like it. I thought that it was not plausible that this man that was so bad, such a monster, becomes this incredible woman. And the whole flow, it didn't, I was not buying it. And of course, it won all those prizes, and everybody's saying how wonderful it is. And so I watched it again, and I liked it. And I actually realized how well constructed it is, and how new, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but the construction, the cinematography is very new to me. It's and maybe that's why I was a little taken by surprise. I guess when I saw it, nobody had really talking about it at the time. So I'm surprised by my own self, by realizing how much I like it now after not liking it at all. And it's not plausible from the beginning. I actually, maybe because I know the cadence of the events in the movie, that then it's easier this second time around. And yeah, so sorry, that was a little long, but
No, that's great. And I
wanted to
love
share
when that happens. I love, and it's not just with films, it can be with, art
books.
we first encountered years ago and you come back to later and, you realize this thing. I was just in Palm Springs for the film festival and there's a David Hockney show. And I've always had a complicated reaction to his work, and getting to see it in person, where I think it's usually been in, books or magazines or something, was an interesting experience. And I was challenging some of my ideas. So I'm happy to hear you had kind of a journey with this movie. You also brought up something about how when you revisit a movie and the first time through, for instance, I think every Quentin Tarantino movie is this way, where I really don't know where it's going. And so you're and I felt that with Emilia Pérez personally. Where is this story going to take me? And there are things that are surprising about jumps in time or developments in characters, twists, things like that on first encounter you're just wrestling with, or you're adjusting to. There's kind of a whiplash, effect. And then of course, when you've sat with it for a while and you go back, you have a totally different experience because you know the journey. A movie that was like that for me is Oppenheimer, a 3-hour movie, right? The Christopher Nolan movie. 2 hours into the film, the bomb goes off. I thought that was where the film was going, right? And I knew how long the film was, and I knew there was another hour coming. And in my head, I was saying to myself, well, I guess the movie isn't about what I thought what it was about, right? It really is that last hour of the moral reckoning that Oppenheimer goes through after introducing this force, into this weapon, into the world. And so, on second viewing, I went from being, disturbed and angry at the film to appreciating, things about the way it was built. So those are some, personal examples that rhyme with what you're saying. But I saw a few other hands. I scared someone off because there was a hand up earlier. But Amy, go ahead. We'll try and get to everyone.
Yeah, I just want to say I can relate very well with what you've said, Anne Pascal, that when I initially went to see it, I had read nothing. I knew nothing. So after the first half hour, I was so completely taken aback. I'd seen a lot of Jacques Audiard films, and I was like really prepared to understand it. And then I just felt really lost by it, and I wasn't really sure if I could enjoy it, except that the music I thought was very good. But it was just so jarring to me to have these musical interludes. And I just was taken aback completely. I think what happened was I saw that this was the movie that we were going to discuss, and I knew I'd be out of town. I just thought, well, I have to get started. And it was just shocking. And then when we got back in town yesterday, I thought, well, I've got to see a little bit more of this movie. I can't come. And then with like Pascal, I mean, I had a better idea of what it was going to be like. And so then I was able to watch it and really try to appreciate a lot of aspects of it. And actually where I was Mexico. That's where I went. I've been to Mexico a bunch of times, so I'm always interested, you know what I mean? But I didn't feel like this movie really, I mean, they have the shots of Mexico City from up in an airplane or whatever. So definitely you see it there. But I don't really I felt like it could have been anywhere. The fact that they put Mexico City right up on the screen and it's Mexico City, that helped. But I mean, obviously people are speaking Spanish, there's cartels and all that stuff. But otherwise, I didn't know. I don't know. I didn't really see it as something that made me feel like I was where I recognized, you know what I mean, having been to Mexico several times. So anyways, thank you. Thank you to everyone for listening.
That's interesting, Amy. And maybe it's reflective of the fact that he kind of had to cheat Mexico on locations in France, but it's surely a different side of Mexico from the one that you've been visiting too. So I'm not in a position to sort of speak to its authenticity. But before moving to the next person, Susan, I saw you had your hand up. Do you want to share?
Sure. Thank you. Sorry, I'm not good with the hand raising.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say I went in knowing nothing. I saw Cartel, I saw Machine Guns, I've seen Zoe in The Lioness. I'm waiting for Action and Adventure. Stayed with the subtitles. I thought it was phenomenal. It had everything: action, music, love, the story connected. It blew me away how good it was. Very, very impressed. So
Glad to hear that. Sharon, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, one of my favorite movies is Le Prophet. I just thought it
Okay.
was a fabulous movie. So I went into it thinking I would enjoy it. And then when I left, I was laughing to myself about how Oyard would have presented this movie to a producer. You know, it's about a drug lord who wants to have a sex change operation and goes through this and fakes his own death and has this whole relationship with his ex-wife and blah, blah, blah. And, oh, by the way, it's a musical. You know, it's like, no. And so I took great pleasure in presenting this movie synopsis to my friends. You know, and the kicker being, and it's a musical. So I just thought it was so bold and so different from The Prophet, in that, I mean, there was sort of this magical realism that happened in The Prophet, but, you know, this whole musical overlay, and it was done so well. You know, it wasn't like most musicals. So I just thought it was bold and wonderful, and I'm really rooting for it for the Oscars.
I want to thank you for sharing. I want to take a couple more initial reactions, but I think we should unpack shortly kind of why it's a musical and what it's being a musical does. But let's see. Sharif and Zainab, you always have really interesting things to say. Let's hear your reaction.
Well, I think to evaluate this movie, we have to look at two different things. Is it bold, as you said, Peter? Yes, it is a bold movie. Is it technically very good? Yes, it is. But did it handle a very serious issue in Mexico, which is people disappearing by the mafia and so on and so on? It didn't. It was ridiculous even in handling this part. And it is sufficient to look at what Mexicans are saying about the movie. The Mexicans are saying, this is not Mexico. Most or all of the stars are not Mexican. They don't speak Spanish Mexican. And the real issue about the gangs and the disappearance and so on, which is a very problematic issue in Mexico, was handled in a very superficial way. So is it a good movie technically? Yes. But is it a great movie from the point of view of tackling an issue? It is not.
It's interesting to hear that ambivalent kind of reaction. Go ahead, Zainab, you wanted to add something. I'll let you
Yeah,
speak.
well, as far as I'm concerned, maybe I watch movies and read novels for the wrong purpose. It's the social and human issues in them that make a difference for me. Maybe I do that for pleasure. I don't do it with for any other reason. And I think it tackled a very, very important issue, which is transitioning from one gender to another, from one sex to another, and the agony. And one thing I remember very well, and I don't know whether that was right or wrong, and I don't know how people feel after going through such an experience, But when she went to Tel Aviv, and I think her name was Rita, the lawyer.
That's right.
And she went to the doctor who was going to perform the operation. And he told her, I can change bodies, but I cannot change souls. So this component of being a parent in the person didn't go away. It didn't go away at all. Yeah. And
I think it's, go ahead. I don't want to step on you.
Yeah.
Finish your,
so go ahead.
no, please.
Yeah, it didn't go away at all. And the strange thing is that there is absolutely no guessing that this person is that person. I mean, you can never say that the man transitioned to be this woman. Absolutely. So this is what everything else, being a musical, being this, being that, whether it's done in Mexico or out of Mexico, the language, everything, as far as I'm concerned, recedes. It's this issue, which is a problematic issue here in the United States and in, of course, more conservative or more, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I want to come back to that too. So it certainly makes sense to talk about transitioning, about the representation of transitioning. This, one of the key things about this film is that it was made by a white, straight French man, but he did reach out to a trans actress to play the role. That interestingly and unprecedentedly, this film won a prize at Cannes, which was the Best Actress prize for its 3 leads. And I think in doing that, it's very interesting. There's clearly kind of a statement being made by that. I have my own theories about, kind of why and what that's about, because I think actually one of those 3 performances is patently terrible, but one of them is astonishing and one of them is really groundbreaking. So it's like, I think they wanted to kind of celebrate in general something that's going on here. But I'll let you guess which ones those are, but I think if you saw the movie, you might agree with me. Let's see. Steph, go ahead and tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it hit on a lot of topics in a way that makes it palatable for people in an unpredictable way on how the film unfolded. Not only in Mexico, they have horrific stuff going on with femicide. Like women are they started out with that. The whole court case was hitting on that and how it brought it in and how she's defending it. And then the disappearance of people and stuff. So it's a real deal there, and it's making it palatable for people to start to come to understanding of the horrors of this stuff going on. And I think they played with it with the gender roles in touching on the transition. So they hit on so many big topics, and I thought it was very creative done and is reaching people in ways that maybe they wouldn't be reached otherwise. So kudos to them.
Yeah, it's actually, it's hard to know with a Netflix movie exactly the extent of how much it's being seen, because Netflix is able to reach more, audiences than traditional theatrical releases do. But by contrast, they don't share the numbers. And so, we'll never know exactly how many people watched Roma or who watched this movie. I think it's funny that anytime someone goes to look for Emily in Paris, they see that little tile right next to it in the search window is Emilia Pérez. How many people just kind of were like, oh, I heard something about that from somebody or other, and just check it out of curiosity. I imagine this movie is quite the ride for anyone who takes it kind of with no awareness going in, and that's kind of exciting. I think we can kind of start to unpack some of the different dimensions of this movie now, but maybe starting with this idea of a musical, because I think one thing that musicals kind of buy you is a certain kind of fantastical freedom, where you can this movie deals with themes that have already been brought up in this conversation so far, you know, very serious real world issues. But by virtue of it being a musical, that's not the way that people express themselves in real life. And so you're already kind of on a heightened, you know, level or vibration or something with this movie. And it can take certain leaps. And I find myself sometimes asking just plausibility questions in normal movies, where here they come up in my mind, but I'm like, it's a musical. I'll forgive it that. You know, the biggest one for me is early on, like, how does the wife not know that Manitas, who has been on hormones for 2 years and who demonstrates the progress he's been making so far in a way that any trans person finds offensive just by kind of ripping open her shirt and showing, you know, her breasts. How does the wife not know this? I mean, there's a part of me that actually kind of wants this entire movie from the point of view of the wife. I think she's going through something really fascinating, and instead is kind of played as a villainess. But Deidre, it sounds like you have some thoughts to piggyback here, or take us in a new way.
It's interesting you bring up that point, because that actually played out in real life with the Jenners, because Bruce Jenner had already gone through and been taking hormones for quite some time. And so
Interesting.
Kris Jenner, yeah, they were still married. So that is a real life issue that some couples deal with in that particular scenario. And when she was talking, when they were talking and she was asking, when Emilia was asking, like, how was your husband? She basically said, our physical marriage had stopped a long time ago. So it's plausible that she did not know, but the Jenners talked about that because he'd been going through hormones for a long time before they divorced. So it happens in real life. But the comment I did want to make, if I could, was I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Zainab said, which is pretty much usually what happens on these calls. But I'm probably one of the few people that went into this. I knew a lot about them. I heard several interviews with Zoe and the director. So I was not blindsided by the content. And also I've seen other films and television shows that have played out in this very same theme. As a matter of fact, for those of you that have seen the TV series Batiste, one of the storylines in one of the plot lines is a former mafia one person who transitions and is living in hiding and is running an actual shelter for abused women. So the plot line.
Say the name of the show again. I'm not familiar with it.
It's called Batiste, and it's actually I'll put the name of it in the chat, because the actor is actually, he's a French Turkish actor. He's very popular. You've seen him in several films. Where you probably saw him was La Femme Nikita, the Luc Besson character. He plays her handler in that film, but years ago, but he's done several films since then. But he plays a retired police detective who is looking for a young girl whose parents are trying to find her. And the young girl has been a part of this shelter that is being run by a former head of a brutal cartel who has transitioned and is living in secret. And to the point, her lover doesn't know that she has transitioned. So this plot line is not new, because the Batiste TV series was probably out before COVID. So it's been a while. So this was not a new plot line. As to how I felt about the film, I know everybody has talked about similar plot lines. I will agree, like I said, with Zainab, but I also will say the pieces around the cartel, that to me, they really diminished it, and it was almost laughable, to your point, the way that they portrayed it. And when I Googled like similar films, 2 films came up that tell me a lot about this film: Sicario, which I also was not a fan of, and also Moulin Rouge. So when you get a film that has that very different genres that are saying it's a similar film, that speaks volumes for me. And I'll stop there. So
It's funny, this could be the love child of those 2 movies, but they're so different, you know.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah, Maureen, I saw you raised your hand a while back, so go ahead.
It's okay. It's interesting to hear other comments, because it brings to the surface other things that I think I'd rather talk about. But I will mention briefly, I finished the movie about 2 minutes before the video started, because
just in case, I didn't want anybody to spill the beans and tell the end, which was very interesting. But somebody brought up the point about, you can change the body, but you can't change the soul. That was, something that it really reminded me of that scene. I only seen it twice. But the other part that struck me was the scene when Emilia goes to bed with the little girl, or the little boy, excuse me, and said,
Yeah.
"You smell like Papa. You smell like the mountains. You smell like," it's like the child knew there was something there. And I thought that was, I'm, and I because I'm such a big animal lover, dogs relate to people by their nose and not so much by vision. And I had an experience where I hadn't seen a dog for 20 years, and he recognized me not visually but by the scent. And it's very interesting. It's like children and animals have this sixth sense, and I thought it just rang a bell in my mind that this little boy had an inkling that reminded him of his father. And I thought that was a very touching scene.
It is.
whole-
Go ahead.
No, the whole thing. And I have to say, with Emilia, my emotions went up and down. First, I felt sorry for him, her, and then I thought, wow, he's being really possessive, and he wants the best. He wants the best of both worlds. He wants to keep his children at home with him, her, and yet, not have the wife marry off Gustavo. So emotions, my emotions went up and down, and I have to say that the musical part of that, the interludes where they went in, kind of brought me down a little bit. So it was almost like a mental reprieve for me, wanting to know, okay, what's going to happen next. It was like a little interlude for me, but it was interesting. I've talked to people who didn't like it, and I tried to keep an open mind and think I may not like it either, but I have to say, all in all, it was very well done, and I really appreciated the style and the whole movie, the whole way it was presented. Yeah.
It's interesting because Pascal, I'll call on you in a moment, but to your first point about second viewings, on first viewing, I spent a large part of this movie thinking that we had to worry about whether she would be found out. Like that was kind of like the tension that I felt, which turns out not to be something that they're really dealing with at all. There's maybe just one little flicker of it, later on. But in general, the movie really treats the character as being reborn through this transition. And I think one of the things that it being a musical kind of forgives is what is poetic, but maybe not so realistic, to take what is almost the most extreme example of toxic masculinity on the planet, which would be a murderous cartel boss, and with a grill and tattoos and, the particular look that this character has, and to swing that to this kind of saintly, maternal other extreme. But that, by virtue of the fact that we're not dealing with a documentary or something that's, a really rough and rugged, realistic movie, but rather this movie plays like opera to me, I think. And that kind of didactic thing can instead be seen as poetic, I believe. And I think that those questions that numerous among you have kind of picked up on seem to be at the center of the movie, this idea of, can you change or not? And I'm not sure that I or some of you agree with the idea that one can do that. If you've ever moved to another, as a child, moved to another school and you start over, you can kind of start to present yourself in a different way, but who you are ultimately kind of bubbles up. And except in that one phone call where Rita has both parents on either line, and you see Emilia getting really angry and almost scary. I don't think we ever see Manitas again, which is interesting. That the movie really seems to believe that you can have this transformation. Pascal, go ahead.
Yeah, at this point, I just wanted to go back to the songs to and really I would be curious to have your opinion on one particular scene. So first of all the songs I feel enhance, when I saw it the second time, of course, enhance the story, whether it gives more context, like the first one, in the market where we see poverty and we see really the environment, or others that like the one with the child, that is like a poem, when I think about it. So all of them, I really understand why they're here, except one, which is the one in the hospital, this hospital kind of, this one.
I think of that as the Myra Breckenridge scene, because it's at the moment where the film can either fly off into tasteless, insensitive, kind of exploitation territory, and it almost seems like it's already there, or it's the whole movie is kind of on a tightrope. But carry on. That I'm just inserting my joke here, but I want to hear your reason why that doesn't fit for you.
This one, to me, looked like caricature. It was not enhancing the story. It was, I thought it was diminishing the power of the story. It made it as if it was a joke, as if the change, the transition was an entire joke. So it really, I was very puzzled by that particular scene. So I wonder how others also reacted to it.
Would anyone else like to play off of Pascal's comment about that scene? Maybe you have a take. I can offer mine, but I don't want to take the opportunity away. I do think that's a tricky scene, and I think if I had to guess, I would say it betrays Audiard's kind of naive interest in trans people, but only to a point. I find that scene in the one where Rita goes to the Israeli doctor, and throughout that exchange, I guess he's a plastic surgeon and not a doctor who may have ever done a transition operation before, because all of his questions seem not sensitive to the idea that the client is a woman or feels like this procedure would, kind of affirm the gender that she identifies with. The doctor's always describing Mr. Mystery. He, is he a she? And again, there are kind of like these playful games. And I think it's interesting, in the United States, if you make a movie about these subjects, it's really important as part of the process to reach out to GLAAD, which is the Gay and Lesbian Anti-Defamation organization. And their role is to kind of make sure that kind of hurtful stereotypes are not being propagated. And in some ways, in doing that, they can be overly controlling, and they don't always kind of allow artists to express kind of what their instincts are, but they are trying to kind of curb certain cliches or certain kind of like harmful portrayals. And it's interesting that GLAAD has not really embraced or endorsed this movie. And I think one of the reasons, there is an article on their site, I don't need to make the argument because I don't necessarily share it, but I can quote this one line from it that I find kind of interesting, which is gender transition seems to fascinate just about everyone who hasn't gone through it. That's a quotation attributed to Casey Plett, who's a Canadian writer, and it's true. I mean, I think this is true about in gay stories. It's the coming out, part that's always really interesting. And why would that be? It's the most dramatic part of any person's life story. If you're trans, if you're gay, I mean, it's like where the most adversity or conflict tends to come in. I think that GLAAD would prefer to see a story like this begin once Emilia Pérez is already Emilia Pérez, and maybe you would find out something about the backstory, or maybe we would never be confronted with the idea that she ever had another identity. And I'm not going to say there's a right answer or not. I think that for the story this movie's telling, it is about this journey, but there is something very abrupt that happens tonally after the transition happens. And the scene of the transition is kind of like, I'm sure had everyone at GLAAD having, aneurysms, which is where she takes the pocket mirror and kind of examines her new genitals, because the people who are most interested in the genitals of trans people are those who are not trans themselves. It's just part of it's like, journalists are always asking trans people about whether they've, gone through the affirmation surgery, all these things that are totally inappropriate that you would never ask, Mel Gibson. You wouldn't ask Mel Gibson if he's circumcised or not, but you want to know if, like, how far along Jenner has, kind of gone, or what have you. And like I find all of this dialogue really interesting, because I think we're all learning culturally about this dimension of the human, kind of spectrum that, is sort of like coming out into the light now. But so there's something interesting about this movie where on one hand, it's shining a spotlight on things like that. And in the musical number you pointed out, to me, when I reference Myra Breckinridge, I find that movie to be kind of outrageously retrograde, and that's kind of its brand. Even when it came out, it was trying to tweak everybody. But like the idea that 50 years ago and now I'm having similar feelings in that number is kind of interesting. But maybe that's too much of me monologuing. But it's meant to kind of bring into, or like make those of you on the call feel comfortable, if you want to, questioning some of the representation stuff, if you care to. I do want to invite Haley, who said something really interesting, to talk, or else I can just read your comment. Haley, do you want to unmute and share your thought with us?
Hi, sure. So you were talking about change earlier and thinking, can this, person change? And I didn't really see it as them changing. I saw it as more they had on a false persona, or like the change was kind of behind them. And so then they leave this false persona behind, and they're really showing their true self. So it's not really that they're doing a change, and more so that they're leaving behind, something that it wasn't them to begin with. So for me, at least, when Emilia you never see, it's Mateus, I think. You never see him again.
Oh, Manitas is the character.
Thank you. And you never see him again because he was the false persona, or the thing that Emilia had to change into to fit, until she could like reveal herself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, it's kind of literally true in that you have the same actress playing both characters, and to play Manitas requires all the prosthetics and, what you're saying. In a way, it's the costume or the disguise, the false persona. There are a few lines that suggest that could be true as well. Like, I think when Manitas is negotiating with Rita, they're talking about how a certain expectation exists for a cartel boss of violence and all these other things. I mean, for me, it's hard to sort of forgive all the crimes that Manitas would be guilty of, but then the story, even if viewed through kind of my moralistic prism, is a redemption story, right? It ends with a saintly procession through the streets of a town, you know, sort of saying how important the work that Emilia Pérez did was. And maybe, I don't know if it doesn't bring back a single life or anything, but it shows a kind of remorse in another chapter. But it's hard to imagine someone who was responsible for whacking people and all this kind of stuff that we presume Manitas. I mean, I think it's clear that that violence existed. You know, that was kind of doing it as a show. That said, we live in, you know, kind of like a society that might impose certain expectations on boys or on, you know, that might be a path you go down. Certainly gangster, like kids who grow up in the influence of gangs are often doing things that may not be authentic to who they would be if you could take them out of that socialization, you know, thing. Thanks for bringing that up, though. I thought that was an interesting thing. I hope my challenging aspects of it doesn't mean that I don't find it fascinating. If I'm challenging it, it's only because I'm not sure if Odiard is on that wavelength or not. You know, I'm not even sure if he sees her as always having been a woman or what. Are you guys aware that the movie is inspired by like 3 sentences in a French novel, and he kind of extrapolated everything about it from that. But I doubt it's even kind of competing in an adapted screenplay or anything category, because how could it be? There's just a mention in this kind of one of these novels that has, you know, dozens of characters, and there is this character referenced who had lost her lover, a woman, when she was very young, and kind of aspired to becoming the lover that she lost or something like that. I'm happy to think that he did something more interesting with the story than what it sounds like it was kind of suggested by, but it's kind of funny to think where an artist kind of somehow, you know, that little mention in a novel sent his brain into the fireworks show that we end up getting from the movie, you know. Let's see, who else might have some thoughts to bring up. Does anyone have a favorite song from the movie? I think it's interesting that for me, the best song is I don't know what the title of it is, but the one that Selena Gomez sings as a karaoke number. And in some ways, that was the one that feels the most extractable from the film. And yet it's the one that speaks in a way, this character who doesn't really accept her, I guess, dead husband's, doesn't know, or is kind of totally outside of that, is singing, you know, lyrics that really are about acceptance and are about your inner identity and all of that. But it's so funny to sort of like everyone else is kind of singing bursting into song in charity balls or in the middle of a crowded street or in court. And here, that character is basically getting to sing in a karaoke club. But oh, Susan, it looks like you might be talking, but I can't hear you. If you can unmute, if you want to share, or maybe you're not talking to us.
No, I'm sorry. I was talking about what I had written in the text, but
Oh, go ahead.
no, I'll just let that speak for itself. It was just agreeing with Michelle, whom I also agree with, that Manitas never left Emilia, and I feel was in Emilia the whole time. And sadly, and perhaps justly, that came out more and more to the point that it really was the cause of her demise.
That's an interesting interpretation. And there are clues, right? Like the moment when she bonds with her new girlfriend, kind of like brandishing the pistol that she keeps in her waistband or something. This is not someone who is, you know, kind of joined the convent. You know, Manitas is still somewhere in the identity of, you know, or if not Manitas, you know, that upbringing. Michelle, let me see. I missed your comment. Do you want to speak it out loud? It was here in, or do you want me to?
I can. I don't mind. I was just saying that one scene towards the end where Emilia threw Jessie on the bed and was violent with her,
Yeah.
which was really way post Emilia. That's what I thought was the beginning of the end for Emilia, because everything that happened after that was because Emilia was trying to continue to control Jessie. And that whole time, Jessie was trying to find her independence. And really, I mean, terrible things were done to her and the children if you really backed up and thought about what was happening to them, and even Rita, although Rita chose to buy into that, I guess. I don't know. That's what I was just.
No, I think that's a really valid point. I'm glad you expressed it. I do think that it goes back to my own idea that I would rather see this story told from Jessie's point of view, because, like, just imagine you are told, it's a wrenching scene to watch her learn that her husband is dead. She's already in Switzerland and she learns it on TV, and like, we know more than she does. But if you're kind of like really with her, that's a horrible thing. And then why shouldn't she from then on be free to have her life move forward? But Emilia, whoever said the kind of cake and eat it too thing, it's like Emilia both allows her wife, her widow, to believe that she's dead, and wants to go on having parental access and control over the kids. And not only that, but apparently like dating approval over her widow's, love life. It is interesting, the scene where she's kind of trying to find out whether Jessie was faithful earlier on. But, it's kind of like when you consider the betrayal, I guess, of the way that the faking the death and coming back. And there must be plenty of versions of this in other stories. If you join us for the Count of Monte Cristo, next month, the Count of Monte Cristo is another tale of someone that is basically presumed dead or never to be heard from again, shipped off to a prison, who reinvents himself as this, I guess, Batman of his time, this extravagantly wealthy, avenger. But, it's all based on the idea that no one would recognize who he was as he kind of goes about revenging all of the wrongs done against. But, it's an interesting, again, it works a little bit better, I think, in a musical than it would in a kind of naturalistic drama. But I like that a number of you are reading in, just because it's not told from Jessie's point of view doesn't mean that we're not getting Jessie's point of view. I like that a number of you have kind of like empathized with that character anyway. The Emilia Pérez character does, I'm interested, I don't know if my own brain had kind of gone there, but kind of reading why does it have to end the way it does? But given the past that Emilia Pérez had, if it didn't end the way it is here, it probably would have ended the way that I was fearing, that some person from her past would recognize her, and there would be like the Sopranos or something. It's when it cuts to black at the end of that series, I don't think it's because it was happily ever after for Tony Soprano or whatever. But let's see, we don't have a lot of time left, so if anyone wants to like bring up another dimension of it, we can. Go ahead, Steph.
I think a deep subtext of the film is you never know who people are. You're always presuming they're this, they're presuming they're that. And how it ended, they're glorifying this person that may have contributed to the disappearance of all that people, but they had it how she played out and transformed. And I totally agree with Haley. Thank you for bringing that up. I do think they hit on both sides of the transgender issue. Is, we don't know what people's souls are, and to assume that someone's soul is how we think it is versus how they believe it is, I think is a big struggle in people coming to terms with people's journeys in their life. And I think that touched on it really beautifully to challenge both those positions, because it's you know, causes tension for some people and a lot of misunderstanding. So anyway, this has been a very interesting conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in the real world, kind of where a lot of the politics or awareness sensitivities are around transitioning now. There is talking of, you know, dead names for the, you know, we wouldn't refer to what someone was called before their transition. A lot of times those photos are destroyed. But that is not a literal death. You know, here a literal death is being staged, and a kind of rebirth is being allowed this character that it might be more realistic to see Manitas have to negotiate this with his wife. That would be the reasonable thing, right? You know, for them to come to some agreement that is akin to a divorce and would lay out a lot of these things where Jesse would have any kind of say in it all. But I think it speaks to, even though there's something beatific or saintly about what Emilia Pérez becomes with her actions and the things she's doing to find these, there is something quite controlling and dangerous about the character throughout. And we sense it right away when Rita first realizes that the woman she's sitting next to at dinner is, in fact, someone she met as Manitas. And with that is all of the things that come, the baggage that come with that former identity. You know, she presumes that Emilia will now like clean up this last loose thread or something. And we get this, rewatching it for this session, I had forgotten this kind of like really brutal moment where like you see her with a bag over her head, like having her brains blown out, and then a river of blood, and then a dragon, and then, you know, like, and then the last image is Emilia with the grill of Manitas, you know, kind of there. And it's the movie doesn't forget who the character was, but it seems to invite the idea that there's this redemption going on. And then going back to the question maybe that we just asked a few minutes ago, that ending seems to be something saying that tragically maybe there was just too much, you know, kind of unresolvable baggage from the past to let that character kind of really live out a happily ever after. You know, it kind of comes back to haunt, in a way, Emilia Pérez in the end. I'd be curious, is there anyone who like just really hated the movie? I don't want you to feel like you can't express that opinion. It might be interesting to sort of have a counter opinion. I'm not going to argue with you. Then again, the people who might have had that reaction may not have tuned in for a hour-long conversation about it. It's certainly like one of the
Hello, can I say something?
yeah, please go
Hi,
ahead.
I'm so sorry. I can't figure out the hand raising. I'm on my phone.
Go ahead.
I just want to just say one quick thing. I did love the movie from the very beginning. So I'm not the one saying I hated it. But
That's
I
fine.
just wanted to point out the lawyer character. I think Rita. I'm terrible with names too. So that
That's
was
right.
Rita, right? I just adored her. And why we didn't talk too much about her. I loved her from the moment she started singing, and she talked about her own struggles, like trying to be good and a decent person, and was the one in charge, and like how she was overlooked, not just because she was a woman, but because she was a dark woman, a Dominican, living in Mexico. And then her dancing and all that. And I know that yes, it looks like she kind of sold out, but the truth is her base characteristics continued with her loyalty, with her trying to do the right thing in the setting of crime and other horrible things. And so I really loved that line of the story of the character of Rita and how she really stayed true to herself in many ways. You know, but she was also realistic. So I just wanted to say
Yeah, it's
that.
interesting. In awards terms, you know, they're campaigning her in the supporting category, but I think she's the main character. I mean, you can split hairs a million ways on this, and I also think it's really interesting that we come back to her in numerous scenes where it's really about her life, specifically when everybody else seems to be having romantic prospects. Rita's enduring this, you know, tiresome bar conversation from an idiot guy or whatever, and we realize like, oh, like for all that she's put into this, you know, she hasn't really gotten out of it what we would want for her at that point. There was one other hand that was just up. We're going to kind of wrap up in a minute, but I don't want it. Constance, it was yours. Go ahead.
I'll make it quick. I was not a fan of the movie. I felt that first of all, I had no idea it was a musical. I knew the like one sentence description of it, of the movie. And as I started to watch it, and I thought, what the hell's going on here? Why are these people singing? And then I realized it took me 3 nights to watch it, 3 sessions. I felt the musical portion of it really minimized the seriousness of the transitioning aspect and the cartel aspect. And that's what I felt.
Sure. In a way, it's going back to something that Sharif raised earlier. Like, you know, I think he acknowledged that the filmmaking of this movie is kind of astonishing. I mean, it's like, of all the things in competition, it really felt the slickest to me at Cannes this year. You know, it's like, and from that opening shot, if you had the opportunity to see it on the big screen, I mean, just the way it sounds and feels as you're going over Mexico City, and, you know, like you're just like, I'm in the hands of, like, you know, someone who knows what he's doing. And yet the movie's taking a lot of big, bold swings. And I think, I guess in inviting the criticism here at the end, I want you to realize, like, you can kind of hold those things in your hand at the same time, or you can kind of be excited about aspects of this film and still question others. I think that's true of all great art. And, you know, I do think this is a movie that gets us thinking, gets us feeling in a way that doesn't come along often enough. But I respect that some people, it's, you know, just turned off from the get-go, or there might be a specific creative decision along the way that just kind of like is a deal breaker for them. I'm kind of excited that there are people for whom it's the film of the year. And even though I don't feel that way, I kind of want to let them, you know, have that feeling without me kind of challenging it. But again, I do think that this is a rich text, as we might say, and kind of like as film critics or a film school type people, you know, there's a lot to grapple with here. But thank you. I really appreciate, you know, how much people were willing to share today. Maureen, you gestured as if you might have a closing thought. Is that what that meant? Okay, no. Well, in that case, we're hoping that it works out. We're still waiting to get the final date on when Count of Monte Cristo will be available to stream, because that's really important. It's in theaters now, and it's a 3-hour epic experience that you'll really benefit from seeing on the big screen if you can. But timing wise, we want to make sure that everyone is able to see it on streaming first. And so there's a smidgen of a chance that we may have to kick that one later, but we think by the end of February that will hold. So for now, next month's movie, join us for that, is The Count of Monte Cristo.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Peter. And thanks as always to Renee Ketchum, Isabel Leroux, and Melissa Sora with the Alliance Française. And thank you to everyone who joined us today and for such a rich and wide-ranging discussion of Emilia Pérez. We look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you so much.